If you've ever wondered what it was Demiurge did on his happy farm, I promise it's far worse than you might think. That's just one of the many twisted experiments he's running though, along with the cross-species breeding tests from Season 3 and now these newly revealed grafting tests cut from the movie. And I'm not talking about the horticultural grafting we see in plants or even the basic limb grafting we saw in Elden Ring. I'm talking about some vile experimentation that pushes the boundaries of what's even morally conceivable in the new world. I do understand why the movie decided not to include it, but for me I really think it helps further establish everything Demiurge always has going on. I mean, we're well aware he's running all these experiments in the background, but never do we ever get to see the impact of them. At least not until now. So, if you're curious as to what horrid things Demiurge was doing in the Holy Kingdom, along with the cutscenes leading up to it, stick around as this will cover all of that. Before we get started though, today's video is sponsored by a game I've been keeping my eye on for a while now. The fast-paced anime-style action RPG Duet Night Abyss. Unlike how most free-to-play ones hit you with the usual gacha mechanics though, Duet Night Abyss said no to all of that. That means no character banners, no 50-50 pulls, or even a stamina system. Just weapons and characters earned entirely through gameplay. It's with those characters you'll switch seamlessly between melee and ranged weapons, offering flexible real-time action that feels both responsive and stylish. Add in high mobility movement options like the helix leap, sliding, and a grapple hook, and what you get is a dynamic gameplay loop that rewards both exploration and skill. Plus, with all monetization being purely cosmetic, that means characters are earned via the covert commission system while weapons are forged through collected materials and blueprints. Materials you're actually rewarded more for completing commissions with skill and efficiency. So, with the launch of Duet Night Abyss bringing refined visuals, co-op features, and plenty of challenges, what you'll be jumping into is an action RPG that's gameplay first. One that respects your time and rewards your efforts. They've even got both lead characters voiced by the same duo behind Tanjiro and Nezuko. So, if you're tired of gacha fatigue and want something way more player-friendly, be sure to check out Duet Night Abyss using my link down in the description. It's available now on both PC and mobile, and if you download today you can unlock 7 free characters through launch events, 55 free pulls on the skin banner, then up to 107 in total from the events. But now, let's get back to the video. Part 11. Death and Loathing. With the demi-human king dead and the paladins busy taking care of the rescue efforts, Ainz and Nea now headed towards that massive building I mentioned last episode. It was what Ainz assumed was the enemy's headquarters, and for that reason he believed it needed to be investigated. Such a huge building was one Nea thought the paladins would have searched already though, since detail work such as this was definitely more for them. And she would certainly be right if not for Ainz having placed a subordinate there telling them not to approach it. So while yes, Ainz did say the paladins were busy with other things, turns out they did also make an effort to check out this building. It was a contradiction Nea couldn't help but call out as soon as she heard it. It was before she could question it any further though that Ainz would quickly tell her she needed to start thinking on her own. You see, while he was well aware that he did often tell her a lot of things, in a situation like this, Ainz felt it best for her to find out what she thought was the answer. He wanted her to figure out for herself why was it he might be interested in investigating this building first. This left Nea in a deep contemplation while Ainz would appraise Buzz's items to see how enchanted they were. The sword went by the name Sandshooter, the armor Turtle Shell, the shield Lonza's Merits, the horn caps Unhesitating Charge, the rings Ring of Second Eye and Ring of Sprinting, then the Cape of Protection. Buzz's necklace turned out to be enchanted as well, but where the effectiveness of that wasn't as much as the others, Ainz still seemed happy regardless. So that was Ainz's loot from his battle with the king, bringing them now to his next stage. It was while walking there that Nea thought long and hard as to why Ainz wanted to search this building, but nothing significant really jumped out at her. It had gotten to the point where she just wanted to ask Ainz for the answer, but she knew if she did, that would probably annoy him. So, out of a fear of being cast aside, Nea stayed quiet all the way until they got to the building. Standing out front were 2 of the high wraiths Ainz had summoned earlier, now clearing a path for what appeared to be the residence of the city's ruler. Nea couldn't tell who exactly it belonged to, but based on its size she knew it was at least a baron's but no higher than a count's. Now, considering how not even Ainz's summons had entered the building yet, there was a good chance that enemy demi-humans were still hiding here. That being the case, Ainz warned Nea to be careful. It was almost out of instinct that Nea wanted to remind him to do the same, but after just seeing all he was capable of, she knew warning Ainz was useless. To think he was at any point in danger was foolish. It was then that Ainz would mention what Nea could only assume was his reason for investigating alone, and that was to ensure the Paladin's protection. You see, with Ainz making it clear how he was concerned that this could be the lair of the demi-human's boss, he would state how someone as strong as Buzza might be here. Not once did he say he was concerned with the safety of the Paladins, but with the way he wanted to get the liberation over neatly, Nea quickly jumped to the conclusion that this was all an act of compassion from him. To her, everything made perfect sense now. The reason Ainz didn't want Paladins coming near here was all because someone potentially dangerous was present. And the reason Ainz was saying the weird stuff he was before was because obviously he felt bashful about having it known that he was fighting to protect them. Such was the thought process Nea believed Ainz was operating with. It was once all those invisible strings were connected that Nea's feelings of gratitude overwhelmed her. Though she knew it was inappropriate to think, she fully thought Ainz was quite precious. So when Ainz would then ask if what he was doing made sense, Nea's nod and his subsequent approval of it resulted in a cheerful response that left him confused. Where Nea was ecstatic at Ainz's kind-hearted approval of her, Ainz was stuck wondering what it was she could possibly be thinking. It was once Nea proclaimed how she understood that he didn't want to be the center of attention that, in classic Ainz fashion, he would simply nod his head in confusion. Just like how he does with Demiurge or Albedo, Ainz would hesitantly agree that this was exactly what he was thinking. It was a moment that left him deep in thought for a second, yet another action Nea found adorable too. So, as I'm sure you could tell, clearly Nea's infatuation with Ainz gets more severe the more time she spends with him. I mean, Ainz doesn't even have to do anything for Nea to think he's amazing anymore. Like, at this point I'm pretty sure she'd fit right in with the rest of the denizens of Nazarick. In any case, the two would proceed forward deeper into the residence, unsure as to what to expect next. As a squire, Nea felt it necessary to be Ainz's vanguard, but whenever she made the attempt to move in front of him, Ainz would simply deny it. All Nea could do was stare at Ainz's back and think of just how courageous he was being. This might not seem like such a big deal to us, but for someone who was a far lower ranking like herself, the sight of a king leading the way was very much exhilarating. Eventually, the two would enter a massive opening leading to numerous rooms, but where Nea was unsure as to where to start, Ainz seemed to know exactly where to go. Interestingly enough though, it was prior to leading the way that Ainz would first test Nea. While he knew her sense of sight and hearing were exceptional, Ainz wanted to know if her smell was at that same level too. Unfortunately, her smell and taste were only above average, so when Ainz asked if she could smell where the death and loathing were coming from, Nea wasn't able to answer him. It was a peculiar question since death and loathing were things she didn't even know a person could smell. This led her to think perhaps Ainz could sense it cause he's an undead, but more importantly, it meant they were heading towards it. So to think they were walking towards such a dreadful scent put Nea's guard up. She prepared herself for the possibility of stepping in front of Ainz to protect him, or at least having her bow ready to shoot whatever may jump out at him. Reason being that if she couldn't at least do that, then what point did she have in even being there? I mean, she'd already sat herself out during the buzzer fight. So, advancing forward was for the most part uneventful, up until they reached a door seemingly different from all the others. Where most of the others looked like they belonged in a noble's residence, this one was thick and made of iron. It looked as if it was taken straight from a prison somewhere. Such an oddity made Nea feel uneasy, so much so that she didn't even feel like she was in the same place anymore. Now, it's here you'd think these were the same doors that led to the orcs, but what Ainz discovered before them was something far worse. It was an empty room with no windows, magically enchanted bars glowing red as they surrounded the perimeter. Only one desk and 2 chairs furnished the interior, leading Nea to think that this was a torture chamber of sorts. She'd never seen one herself, but if she was forced to imagine one, this was pretty close to what she'd think of. There was also one other door leading further inside, but before that was a peculiar piece of paper lying on the desk. It was a document covered with strange text Nea had never seen before. It didn't look like a language from the Holy Kingdom either, so Nea could only assume it was a demon language. Turns out, Ainz wasn't familiar with it himself, so in order to figure out what it was this document said, he would equip a magic monocle allowing him to read it. Since an item like this did use up quite a bit of mana though, Ainz would first ask if someone else had the power to read unfamiliar writing. It was a question most likely intended to discover whether anyone on the Holy Kingdom side had a talent for reading other languages. Nea unfortunately didn't know of anyone, but it wasn't absurd to think someone did. I mean, with all the stories she'd heard from other squires, there were plenty of talents that granted minor abilities like this. So, just because she didn't know of anyone herself, didn't mean that someone else like Remedios or Gustav wouldn't. Naturally, Ainz would ask if they knew next, a question Nea figured was best asked to them directly. It was a strange persistence on the topic that left her wondering what would happen if they didn't know anyone. Well, turns out nothing, as Ainz simply thought it useful to know if someone could. He felt if they could read the information left behind by Yaldabaoth, then that would greatly change how they'd plan their next moves. Of course, that only applied to situations where Ainz wasn't present, since as he said in the beginning, translating this only cost him magic. Yes, it did diminish his magic further than he'd like, but for a single page like this, Ainz figured he could make an exception. He just made it clear they needed to be careful now. So, Ainz would read the document, then set it down, stating how using the monocle really did use up quite a bit of magic. He would then open the door that led even deeper inside, revealing faint breathing and the smells of blood. Still, these weren't the orcs we saw in the anime, as what lay inside here was something worse. Much worse. They were the victims of what can only be described as terrible experiments. A grim sight seemingly too gruesome for even Nea, as before she could enter the room herself, Ainz would raise his arm in a clear warning to stay back. All of it was, however, detailed in the document he read, so rather than have Nea witness something that would probably scar her, he instead proceeded to describe the text version of it. As it turns out, what was performed here were terrifying acts of grafting. Not the type you may know from plants, but rather the more macabre version, like cutting off one creature's arms then attaching it to another. That and cutting victims open and trading their organs with something different. Initially, those experiments began with exchanges between blood relatives, but eventually they expanded to include transfers between different species. Whether it was humans, demi-humans, or even animals, various specimens were tested and observed. The end result being what became of them once healing magic was cast on them. So, the goal was to see whether these things could survive the transformation, and if they didn't, determine what part of the process was the cause of death. For those that did, well, they were the unlucky ones locked in the room Ainz had just opened. Disfigured victims with limbs of their relatives and other species attached to them. Many were still sliced open too, so in an effort to save them, Ainz would have Nea call for the priests and Remedios ASAP. It was once they arrived that the terror of what they saw could only be conveyed by their reaction. Words couldn't describe just how appalling this scene was to them. Ainz would however seem focused on a different topic, specifically on the document and whether Remedios or Gustav knew of anyone who could translate it. He would describe it as a list of the people experimented on and what was done to them, hand it over alongside some additional documents he found, then ask bluntly if anyone could read it. When Gustav responded no and asked if Ainz could just translate it the same way he did with the first one, Ainz would say how doing so would cost him too much mana. Mana he made it seem like he desperately needed to conserve now. Gustav would then ask if they could just borrow his magic item, but the way he put it was that this was a national treasure of sorts. Just like how Remedios wasn't able to hand over her sword at the Sorcerer Kingdom, this monocle was apparently a sacred item more precious than a sword. So it's for that reason that handing it over wasn't possible. This makes that scene from Season 4 way more funny, since while at this point we don't know whether the monocle is in fact this super rare item or not, the way Ainz just hands it to Fluter makes it clear it isn't. It probably doesn't even require that much mana to use either. So, obviously Ainz is probing for information, and that's whether the Holy Kingdom can figure out this demon language. It's for that reason Ainz would task the Paladins with figuring out how to read these documents. Even if they had to seek help from the south, Ainz made it seem like translating them was of the utmost importance. Next came the topic of the orcs, a separate group of prisoners the paladins weren't having any success getting useful information from. Considering they were brought here as captives, that made figuring out how to deal with them difficult. I mean, it's not like they were enemies who attacked their cities, but at the same time they weren't allies they could spare resources on either. It's for this reason Gustav would seek out help from Ainz, leaving them in his hands as a problem he can solve. It was before heading over to them, though, that a priest from the room of victims would emerge looking exhausted. He would describe their state as the most horrible abuse he'd ever witnessed, but for those still alive, the healing magic seemed to be working. I'm sure not in restoring them to their original form, but at least in stabilizing their condition as open surgery experiments. So, with everything here for the most part resolved now, Ainz and Nea would head over to the orcs. It was while on their way there that Ainz would suggest finding someone capable of seeing through transformation. With this demon writing indicating the presence of demons, it wasn't illogical to think demons could be hiding around them. I mean, they were capable of transforming into both humans and animals. Unfortunately, the only person Nea knew capable of that was from legend, so this was yet another question Ainz would have to direct to Remedios. Still, Nea would take an interest in the topic herself, wondering if transformations were just like illusions. Such was a question that would pique Ainz's gamer knowledge, leading him to summarize the key element differentiating an illusion. So, where a transformation was more this physical trait, an illusion was best to consider as a tricky type of magic. How tricky the magic got fully depended on how quick the illusionist's wits were, as well as whether they truly specialized in illusionary magic. That being the case, a specialist would be capable of something known as perfect illusion, letting them deceive all 5 senses. As for someone who's reached the ultimate powers of illusion, they would be in possession of a move that could allow them to deceive the world. Of course, it was an ability that could only be used once every few days, but to deceive the world with it was a level Nea couldn't even imagine. What does deceiving the world even mean? Well, according to Ainz, it meant the illusionist could do anything any other tree of magic could do. Technically, it would still be an illusion, but with this ultimate power of deceiving the world itself, that meant this illusion would become no different from the truth. So, with illusion and reality now indistinguishable, this ultimate illusionist could replicate the power of any other spellcaster, even an undead like Ainz. Now, I couldn't tell you what part of Yggdrasil these illusion powers apply to, but it seems like to specialize in it would have proved to be quite game-breaking. In any case, it was after this that Ainz's conversation would switch to talents, a topic he seems to keep coming back to. The reason Nea didn't know much about them herself is because talents weren't something the Holy Kingdom kept records on. It was a different approach from how Ainz wanted to operate his own kingdom, since tracking everyone's talents was a project he'd like to undergo over the next 10 years or so. It was a period of time Nea could only think of as long, but to her that was probably what made the difference between a commoner and a king. To her, only a king like Ainz could look so far into the future. This finally brings us back on track with the movie, making everything I just talked about cut content from right after the Buzza fight. I fully thought the rest of the cut content was just going to be minor cuts and small details, but here we are with one of the biggest removed scenes yet. Now, I don't know about you, but with Demiurge having such a wide reach over the affairs of a lot of countries, it would have been nice to see the impact of what he's working on. Like, we know he has his happy farm and he does all these other terrible things, but never is the terrifying nature of them made as clear as these grafting experiments were. So that's a scene I think would have done well to better establish this evil part of Demiurge. It's this element we know is always going on in the background, but never actually get to see until now. Next comes the scene with the orcs, but that's the part I'll talk about next video. For now, I hope you enjoyed learning more of Demiurge's war crimes. That and this developing relationship between Ainz and Nea. If you did, then leave a like, and if you want to see more, then be sure to subscribe. Until next time though, ciao!